Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the Arc-of-Forbin County Parent Education Support Group meeting on Zoom today. I'm Carrie Axtell, the Advocacy and Youth Programs Director. Our group meets virtually on the second Thursday each month throughout the school year, and we like to start with an educational presentation. So I invite you to stick around afterwards for the support group where we can talk and share our experiences afterwards if you like. The Arc-of-Forbin County is a nonprofit organization. It was established in 1968 for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD. And we ensure opportunities for people with IDD and their families to maximize their quality of life within our community. We do that through disability rights advocacy for and with people with IDD. And we provide information about community services and resources. We organize resource fairs, support groups for parents, as well as teen and adult siblings. And we also hold several fun events and activities for people with IDD who are in their teens, 20s, and into mature adulthood. We're also home to the largest Special Olympics delegation for adults in our region. We offer 11 different sports with over 130 athletes. So we have lots of fun. But if you'd like to learn more about the ARC and what we do, visit our website, arcoffortbend.org. And you can also check out our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and reach out to me if you'd like. I've put my information in the chat box. If you have any questions during the presentation, if you'd like to type them in the chat box while you're still thinking about them, or if you want to share them with our presenter at the end, that's fine as well. But if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We have some exceptional professionals here in the community that share their knowledge and expertise with us. And this month, we're pleased to welcome Nyla Castillo, who is a registered behavior technician and a teacher at the Monarch School and Institute. And Nyla is going to be providing some tips about behavior improvement strategies and how to communicate more effectively with a neurodiverse person. So first I'll give a little bit of background. So Nyla was born right here in Missouri City, Texas. So she's a native of Fort Bend County. She attended the University of Houston and received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology with a focus on child development in 2020. And she's also currently a graduate student at the Arizona State University working towards her master's degree in special education with an emphasis on ABA, or Applied Behavior Analysis. And she'll continue that training to become a board certified behavior analyst. As a certified registered behavior technician, Nyla has worked with various age groups in both residential and clinical ABA settings, such as at Texana Children's Center for Autism and Apara Autism Center in Sugar Land. And that at that time, she was a lead RBT. As she continued into her career, she became a professional educator at the Monarch School, teaching children with neurological differences in a small class ratio. This year, she is an executive function coach there at Monarch, and she supports the individual needs of each listener and learner by providing therapeutic strategies and behavior interventions so that they can be successful in the classroom. Nyla also began working with the Arc of Fort Bend in 2021, giving back to her community. As the on-site event manager, Nyla gets to create a space for teens with intellectual differences to have increased opportunities and develop positive social interactions with the peers in the positive environment. And we can't thank Nyla enough. She's a valuable member of our team. So I'm thrilled to introduce Nyla Castillo as our presenter today, and can't wait to learn from you, Nyla.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I appreciate it. Hi, first I just want to thank everyone for their time today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn these skills and to gain this knowledge. Today, my presentation will be about positive parenting, skills anchored in the science of human behavior. My background is in applied behavior analysis, and that simply is the science of human behavior. Today, the presentation is based off of the book by Glenn L. Latham called Parenting with Love, and then also The Power of Positive Parenting. And so with that, we'll get started. Today, I hope to explain and gain your understanding in the 4 basic principles of human behavior. We'll identify 4 positive things parents can do when children behave well, 4 things that they can do when children misbehave, and we'll also recognize 8 parent traps that you must avoid. So in the science of human behavior, it's not like chemistry or physics. There are no finite expectations, but just like physics and chemistry, there are laws that follow, and it's the relationship between cause and effect. Second, I don't mix chemicals and I don't drop apples on people's head, but what I do study is human behavior. And what human behavior tells us is that under certain conditions, the probability of treatment producing desired effects is greater than in other instances. So that just means that the environment that we set our children in is the environment that they grow in and learn from. We can use the science of behavior to predict outcomes, and we use our knowledge to achieve the outcomes that we want, whether that can be minimized challenging behavior and increased desired behavior. And so it's our job as parents to create an environment in which the probabilities for success are increased for our children. We have the opportunity to teach our children different life skills that they're going to generalize out into the world. So because we can adjust and create this environment for them, we would be successful if we were trying to minimize the crying of our baby who is in our home environment. We are their primary care providers. We give them the food they need. We change their diapers when they need it. But also, it may be more difficult when you have an antisocial behavior of a violent teenager under the influence of peer pressure. And that just means that they have separate outside factors that in their environment that produce those challenging behaviors, as mentioned, the antisocial and violent behaviors. And so the probability of moving behavior in the right direction is increased with the application of science of human behavior. And so our 4 principles is that behavior is a product of its immediate environment. Behavior is shaped by consequences. Behavior is ultimately shaped by positive and negative consequences, and that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. And I'll go into those in more detail. So behavior principle number 1, behavior is largely a product of its immediate environment. And that just means that if you fix the environment, you'll fix the behavior. In our home environments, we have interactions with our children where we're teaching them, we're telling them right and wrong. And so our environments are reactive. Children behave in age-typical or non-age-typical ways, and we react to those behaviors. We redirect them, we give, reinforcement, and we also give punishment. And so as parents, we must create a proactive environment that is positive and reinforcing. And that looks like modeling appropriate behaviors. I think one thing that I always think about is the spilled milk analogy, where we have this big gallon of milk, and when we ask our child to pour themselves a glass of milk, well, they've got this big old jug that maybe weighs a lot to them. And so if they're 4 or 5 years old, they may not be able to do it. And so they end up making a mess. And so we should take this as a learning opportunity to model like when, there's this much milk, it's okay. But when there's a lot of milk, you got to ask for help. And so we set clear expectations that are reasonable. We supervise. So when they make a mess, we're there to help them clean it up. Behavior is monitored and discipline is non-coercive. And so when we see these children act out in these age-appropriate or non-age-appropriate behaviors, we think, man, what's wrong with that kid? Why is he yelling his head off? Why is he hitting his brother? But instead, we should ask, what is wrong with the kid's environment? A proactive environment is enhanced by raising the general level of positive reinforcement. By smiling more and laughing, having appropriate touch, safe talk, and attentive listening, we can increase these opportunities in the environment where children are having these positive interactions. But unfortunately, as these children get older, these interactions decrease more. I was talking with Miss Carrie just a bit earlier, and as our children grow older, we spend less time with them. They're more independent. And so we have less opportunities. So we have greater opportunities when they're younger, but once they get older, we don't get as much time to correct these behaviors. And so, oh, sorry. And so this is just a chart showing that as the children get older, that the incidence of laughter, touch, talk, and listening, they decrease because they can do things for themselves. Once they get older in their teen years, they're exploring their independence. And so the more that we can increase this laughter, this appropriate touch, safe talk, and listening as they're younger and into their teen and adolescent years, it will have a greater impact on our parenting. Sorry. And so some examples of smiles and laughter is humor at no one's expense. So when you're telling simple jokes with kids, I think that's really important versus making fun of someone that might be hurtful, and it could generalize to other environments where children could potentially be bullying at school. And so we tell lots of good-hearted jokes. And when there's low levels of reinforcement in the house, there's probably more stern, serious facial expressions. Appropriate touch, the skin is our largest organ on the body. And so we should use that knowledge to be able to know that we should do soft touches. We can give our kids a hug, a pat on the back. One thing I always find myself doing is touching the top of my daughter's head. For me, it's very reassuring, and then I'm just doing it softly and just letting her know, hey, like, I'm here for you, or like, I'm just happy to be next to you. And safe talk. Using verbal praise and expressions of affection to acknowledge compliant and appropriate behavior. By reinforcing these good, positive behaviors, we're likely to see them more throughout the day. And being an attentive listener, I can say sometimes when I've seen a really good post on social media and my daughter's asking me to look at the cartwheel she's doing, I'm not really giving her my full attention. And she may not be inclined to want to include me in the future because she knows I'm not paying attention to her. And so as parents, it's our responsibility to create a stable, proactive environment in the home. For behavior principle number 2, behavior is shaped by consequences, meaning that we do what we do because of what happens to us when we do it. I often think of it as when we go to work every day. We go to work, it's so hard to get out of that warm bed that we go to into 45 minutes of traffic on Beltway 8. But at the end, I know that I'm getting my paycheck come payday. And so that shapes, whether I'm tardy, whether I miss a day. And so parental attention is the most reinforcing consequence for children. Over 95% of all appropriate child behavior never receives any parental attention whatsoever. I like to think of it as if your children have siblings and they're playing together, they're playing dolls together, or they're playing out in the yard together, we just let them be. Kids are having fun when in fact, we should engage in that fun. We should let them know, wow, you guys are playing so nicely. Explain to me the game, and just becoming involved in that and reinforcing that positive behavior. Parents are 5 to 6 times more likely to pay attention to their children when they're behaving inappropriately. And that's when they're engaging in those challenging behaviors, we're turning to them and verbalizing what we want from them or telling them not to do something. And that's giving parental attention to the negative behavior. And so many children learn that the only way to get their parents' attention is to do something bad, even if that attention is unpleasant. If it's yelling, it's better than no attention at all. And so I'd like to show this YouTube video really quick. Okay. And so here we have a student just, I'm sorry, a child screaming and crying.
Oh, we're not able to see the YouTube video. Is it on your screen?
Oops. Yes, let me see. I can update that, sorry.
No, no worries.
This one, share. Can you see
Okay.
that now?
Yeah, now I can
Okay.
see it.
Thank you so much. I'll get that restarted for you. All right, and so here we have a video of a child, and he's trying to get his attention from his parents, but it may not be working, so we'll go ahead and play that for you. And we'll watch it just a little bit longer. All right, and so sure enough, the child, it didn't look like he needed much, but he was trying to communicate something. And so often we say that any form of behavior is a form of communication. Now, whether that behavior is appropriate or not, that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of, and that's what we're trying to solve. Let me make my screen big, sorry. All right. And so this child in the video probably learned that when he throws himself and cries, someone's going to go and see what he wants, and then he's going to be able to communicate what he needs. And so behavior is shaped by the consequences. And so behavioral principle number 2 also states that when you, or actually I believe this is for this one, so that behavior principle number 3, sorry, is ultimately shaped better by positive than negative consequences. And so research has shown that the most effective way to reduce problem behavior in children is to strengthen desirable behavior through positive reinforcement rather than trying to weaken undesirable behavior using aversive or negative processes. Often negative processes such as coercion often encourage children to want to escape or avoid the coercer. And it can also drive a wedge between parent and child relationships. In adolescence, this can lead to counter coercion in the form of skipping rules, staying out late, and violating home rules. Negative consequences can also be dangerous. Sometimes they appear to work like magic. For example, when we have siblings who tend to yell at each other, we'll say, hey, don't do that, and we'll yell at them for doing what they did. And often it may stop them from yelling in the immediate moment, but that just means that in the future, it may not always be what happens. It may not always stop that yelling. That just means that that's a behavior that they're going to learn to do. Oh, when my children scream, I scream back at them because that's what my mom used to do with me. And so negative consequences, they don't teach better ways of behaving. They get an immediate stop. And that's often what us parents want to do. We want to stop that behavior in the moment, but it has no long-term effects. And so short-term compliance can lead to long-term losses. Do and say to your children only what you want done and said to your grandchildren. And so I'll go back to this one. And so why do they do what their parents to tell them to do? Because if they don't, I'm in trouble. And so children often will do what they do to escape unpleasant consequences rather than enjoying the pleasant consequences of positive behavior. And with behavioral principle number 4, it says that the past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Unless something is done to interrupt or redirect the course of a behavior, the chances are great that that behavior will continue as it has in the past. And so as we are creating this proactive environment, we should offer alternatives. We should speak to our children about the consequences and what we should do instead. If things are going to get better, something in the environment has to change for the better. And so as parents, we're teaching our children to use the tools simply at home, not screaming at people, keeping their hands to themselves, because if they can't do that in the home, it can generalize outside the home where consequences are much greater. And as they get older, these consequences, they become breaking laws and just worse consequences than when redirected in the home. And so I have just a few questions to ask. And so which do you think best describes a proactive environment? And so if you think low levels of consequences, I don't believe that's right. And so there's high levels of compliant behavior, which compliance, you may not be able to get compliance in the nicest of ways or in a positive way. And so that's not our answer. So D seems to make the most sense. It's high levels of positive reinforcement, reinforcing those behaviors throughout the day and giving those positive behaviors attention, because those are the ones that you want to see. And those are the ones that are most likely, oh, I need to get my mom's attention. Let me tell her I'm going to wash the dishes. I don't know if that'll happen, no promises, but it's more likely that if you reinforce the first time that a student was, that your child was washing the dishes and you were like, wow, like, let's go for ice cream afterwards. Or, you know what, you just did a chore. Here's your $5 for washing the dishes. That's positive reinforcement. And so escape or avoidance could be a result of which of the following? It's definitely not smiling and laughter. Parents ignoring annoying behavior. I think that most children would want to get out of a lecture. I can think of several times where a teenager was like, oh, not this again. Like, you're giving me a lecture. And so they want to escape those and avoid those interactions. And then the research shows that the most effective way to reduce problem behavior in children is to strengthen desirable behavior through positive reinforcement. So just giving that parental attention, what children crave the most, in positive and appropriate behavioral situations. All right, and so we'll talk about what to do when my child behaves well. These are some things to do when your child behaves well. And so strategy number 1, verbally acknowledge appropriate behavior in a positive way. And so some ways that you can do this is the science says to provide 8 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction. And so I know that our lives are busy with soccer games and work and projects and grocery shopping. And so it may be difficult to take data on yourself, but you can pick a specific time. The time that I most I have a 7-year-old daughter, and so the time that I'm most with her is anywhere between 7 and 8 o'clock, where we're together in the home, about to get ready for bed. And so you can use just this simple time block from 7 to 8 and count how many positive interactions and how many negative interactions you had. And if you didn't have 8 positive interactions to every 1 negative interactions, that's your starting point. Behavior that is monitored is often behavior that is improved. And so you can take it 1 hour at a time, 30 minutes at a time, just depending. Take that data on yourself, see how many interactions we had, and then you can move forward with a plan. Behavioral strategy number 2 is to acknowledge appropriate behavior intermittently, meaning randomly or every once in a while. It has a very positive effect on behavior. Reinforcement is given when it is least expected. It is what keeps the lottery systems going. And then positive interactions to acknowledge include touch, smiles, winks, verbal acknowledgement of what is done well. And so just providing the children that time when you see them playing together well, if they do struggle to be kind to each other, for siblings, getting involved in that play with them, that's a positive interaction. A simple wink when your child is over there doing their homework can make a difference, and just smiling often. Sometimes I will catch my child's gaze and I'll just give her a little smile because she doesn't seem to be doing anything, and I just want her to know that she's loved. See, and then so strategy number 3 is to acknowledge appropriate behavior casually and briefly. A few words, no more than 8 to 12, and 3 to 5 seconds. And so you could say something like, "You children are having lots of fun playing together so nicely," followed by a smile. And you want to say exactly what that behavior is, because they could be playing with dolls, but then they use a doll to hit their sister really quick. And so that's not playing as nicely. So you want to make sure that you're being specific. "Hey, I thank you so much for, playing so nicely with your sister." And so let's see, 20 interactions an hour times 5 seconds is approximately 1.5 minutes per hour, which is much better than the amount of time we spend scolding. And then behavioral principle number 4, be descriptive. If there's a negative reaction to the praise, like, "I hate it when we have family dinner," you can simply smile and walk away without the slightest acknowledgement, not giving that negative behavior that parental attention, that positive parental attention, kind of just letting the behavior happen and moving forward, and then finding a positive behavior. So then if they said, "I hate when we have family dinner," and then they come and they follow their chores and they put stuff in the dishes, make that an opportunity to give them some reinforcement because they're putting away their dishes appropriately or completing their chores. And so you also want to give variety to the verbal praise. I work in a school and "good job" is just all done for me. I try not to say "good job." I have a poster of 100 ways to praise children, and I pick a different one every time I leave my office. I'm using something different. I'm being specific because eventually these children are going to always know, "Oh, she said good job." I work with children with intellectual disabilities, and these will become so rote for them that often they will fill in the sentence after I've said, "Wow, you did a great job," and they'll say "good job," and I'm like, "No, I like the way that you completed that puzzle instead," just because they're so used to hearing "good job." It's all done here. And then giving them sincere praise. Delivering it with a smile and giving that eye contact, having that little twinkle in your eye that you are so happy that they are engaging in this positive behavior. And so the following is not an example of what to do when children behave well. And so let's see. Tell them what they did wrong and why you are glad they fixed it. Acknowledge appropriate behavior intermittently. Be brief when casually acknowledging appropriate behavior, or have an 8-to-1 ratio of focusing on positive to negative behaviors. And so what you're not going to do is you're not going to tell them what they did wrong and why you're glad they fixed it. And so which of the following describes a way to increase positive behavior? You can set a timer to reinforce appropriate behavior once per hour. Give your child a treat every time they do what you ask. Put a coin in your shoe that signals you need to focus on reinforcing appropriate behavior. Or put a sign on the refrigerator stating, have you reinforced your child? And actually it's a trick question because all of these are ways to increase positive reinforcement. You can set a timer. There's also some tricks where you can put a loose rubber band around your wrist, and every time you notice that little rubber band, have I reinforced my child today? Have I said 8 positive things today? And then behavior that is self-monitored is often behavior that is improved. And so we just taking that data for 15 to 30 minutes, if you can an hour, but just taking that data, how many positive interactions and how many negative interactions did I have with my child today? Now we'll go over what to do when children misbehave. And so how to respond to inappropriate behavior. And so inconsequential behaviors are behaviors that only annoy. There have been many times this year as a therapeutic coach where my teachers will come in and talk to me and they'll say, well, he keeps making farting noises. And this child is 8 years old and they're in a classroom being silly. Those are typical child behaviors. Those are not, they may be doing it at a high rate, but those aren't behaviors I'm trying to eliminate. What I am trying to eliminate is how many times the student hits other students in the class. That's something that we're going to focus on. And so I would call making farting noises an inconsequential behavior. Because one time when I walked in the room, I noticed this student interacting with a peer and they were both doing fart noises, laughing together, enjoying the space together and having a safe body. And so this was a situationally appropriate behavior to engage in with your peer, especially a same age peer. And so we would call those inconsequential behaviors. Most children engage, I believe, in about 98% of behaviors are inconsequential behaviors. They are things that the children will grow out of. And so consequential behaviors can result in people being hurt, property being damaged, or the environment being ruined. And so these are the behaviors that we want to address. And so we'll move into the strategy. So strategy number 1 is to ignore inconsequential behavior. In ABA, we call this plan ignoring. And so you expect children to engage in these inconsequential behaviors, but we're not going to give it any attention. The same way that parental attention is given and children desire that attention, they desire that attention from their teachers too. And so we can give it to them, but when they're behaving in appropriate ways. So they are annoying, but they do not deserve any attention. They'll eventually fade away when left alone. Strategy number 2 is to selectively reinforce other appropriate behaviors. One thing that we like to do in the classroom is when students are engaging in these challenging behaviors, we'll move to a student who is engaging in appropriate behaviors and we'll reinforce them. If one child is standing up and running around, we'll move on to the next student, or we'll look around the room and we'll say, oh, wow, I love the way that Timmy is sitting down in his seat with safe hands. And that other children, they'll see that, oh, wow, Miss Nyla, she gave little Timmy, like she was cool with him and I want that too. And so we'll move on to the other student and then eventually we'll see that student sitting and we'll be like, hey, you're sitting too, good, like great job, like let's and give them that attention, not in the form of work, but in the form of just that direct attention where you're being kind and fun and they're being safe as well. And so the inappropriate behaviors will ultimately fade away, the victim of no parental attention. And so in applied behavior analysis, we call that extinction. And extinction just means that you're ignoring any behaviors that you don't want to see increased, and you're just not giving them any attention. And so in extinction bursts, if children are used to getting your attention with negative behaviors, if they're used to running around the room because Miss Nyla tells me to go sit down, she guides me to my desk, she removes me from the classroom, that's still giving those negative behaviors attention. So if your children are used to getting that attention, and now you don't focus on that noise that they're making, they may try harder to be annoying. And so the behavior sometimes get worse temporarily before it gets better, and just be prepared for that. And so our strategy for number 3 is to stop, redirect, then reinforce appropriate behavior. So we can tell children to stop doing that. I don't like the way you do that, but we don't offer them an alternative. And so one thing that when I work with children who have more aggressive behaviors, we think of strategies to do instead of, and these behaviors sometimes are incompatible. So if I ask my student to squeeze his fist, then he can't use that fist to hit somebody when he's angry. And so when we stop them, we must redirect. Hey, it looks like you're upset. Should we go take a walk? And just offering them those choices and alternative behaviors. So you'll deliver it calmly, few words, few seconds to delivered. Looking at the child for a few seconds, say, no, that behavior is not acceptable in this house. You don't mention the behavior, and you don't make it a point to say someone could get hurt. You stop it, you redirect. No, we don't do that. When you feel upset, you should do this instead. And then when they're doing that other behavior, you can let them know, thank you for being safe. I understand you're upset, and you can talk to them more about it, but you're not discussing, hitting with them. All right. And so when children misbehave, you must prepare responses in advance and then practice those responses. In my experience, we have behavior implementation programs, and these are programs given to the teachers for the students, but those teachers don't immediately know what to do. We practice and we role play. And for those more serious types of consequential behavior, it goes beyond the scope of this presentation. But so if you're thinking about teenagers, Dr. Glenn Latham gives a wonderful report about some more consequential behaviors in his book. All right, and this chart is just to show you that as children continue to get older, their maturity increases, their civility, which is their politeness and courtesy in their behaviors, and their selflessness tends to go up. But once they reach that point in adolescence where they're developmentally, they're becoming physically developed, and politeness and courtesy all kind of goes out the window during puberty. They have this mentality that parents they don't know anything, and I know all of this, but it's not developed. They have some sense of it, but it's not developed. They have to learn through their interactions. Oh, this is I want this consequence. This behavior gives me that. And so that just shows that as they are in adolescence, it does take a dip. And then it comes back into adulthood as they're developing. And so strategy number 4 is just to avoid parent traps. So criticism can lead to avoidance and escape, talking about, I don't like it when you do this to me, and giving them those lectures of how this behavior could impact them in the future. you might just want to avoid that, because then they're gonna be like, oh, dad's gonna give me a lecture, mom's gonna give me a lecture. And then sarcasm. Sarcasm, as adults, we engage in it, I think, a lot when we're trying to be funny, but really it's rude and demeaning, especially to children who are bound to make mistakes. They're supposed to make mistakes so that they can figure out, how can I get the desired outcome I want? We should avoid threats, because sometimes threats are just, we say them in the heat of the moment. Oh, you gone and did it, I'm going to ground you for 6 months. But then we have to follow through with these consequences. And my child got 100 3 months after their 6 months grounding, but I can't reinforce them because I've got to follow through with being grounded. And so threats, just in the heat of the moment, they're just not a good idea. And so then that brings us to logic. And I think we're the same thing as threats, where when you're upset and you're being emotional, it's hard to be logical. It's hard to be rational when you're upset. And so just avoid trying to talk logic into your children, because in the heat of the moment, right? Just avoid trying to be logical with them, because they're emotional. They're either upset about, the behavior that happened or the consequences of the behavior. So just give it some time. Arguing, you should avoid arguing, because it's not healthy, and kids are encouraged to lie. They're forced to defend themselves, and so they'll do just about anything to defend themselves. And you don't really want to answer. You kind of just want compliance from them. You kind of just want compliance from them. You're not really seeking an answer. And so then questioning as well. Questioning leads to that you might show them that you're not ready, that you're not prepared. And so then using force leads to avoidance and escapes. It destroys the bond between parents and children. And so we want to make sure that we're using as many positive reinforcement before we think about using verbal threats, force, or any physical interactions. And so then lastly is despair, pleading, and hopelessness. So if you don't know how to fix your child's behaviors and you tell them, I just don't know anymore. And if you don't know, they probably don't know either. And so that just gives them this sense of, my parents don't know, I don't know. So then that means that they must be incompetent. And so I know everything, and everything that I do is the right thing to do. All right. And so then, of the following behaviors, I would say hitting is a consequential behavior, which meaning that they have larger consequences, especially out in the world. And so then this one says, how should a parent respond to noise or junky inconsequential behavior that is often age appropriate? And we should just ignore it. Like I said, kids will be kids, and there will be fart noises and all kinds of dance parties. So just ignoring it, and it'll eventually fade away. Farts won't always be so funny. And so that is my presentation. If you have any questions, I believe now is the time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love it. Yeah, the fart noises and all the other little annoying things, right? That are
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, I know one question. If anybody has questions, please feel free to unmute and just ask. Or if you want to type in the chat, you want me to read it, that's fine too. One thing that I know probably some people will be asking for is just to see, are you able to share that presentation, your PowerPoint? Is that something that we can share along with the?
Yes, yeah, I can go ahead and get with you. I have a copy of it on my computer, and I can send that to you, and you can attach it if that's what works best.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah. Because I know some of these strategies, just looking back at those 4 principles, I know I've heard that the one before, that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Like I've heard that somewhere before. So this was really a nice kind of presentation to go over what all those principles are and say, oh, that's probably where we heard this before is in the book and different resources we've heard over time. And you said that was Dr. Glenn Latham, or what is
Yes,
the
so it's the book Parenting with Love by Glenn I. Latham. And it's a great read. In my experience, I'm from the science of applied behavior analysis. And so this book was written in the perspective of someone who does not do applied behavior analysis. So when I read this book, I thought it was amazing because the same principles that we use in ABA are the same principles that are the same foundational principles found in this book as well. And so if you've never taken any courses on applied behavior analysis or have never taken any kind of psychology class, this is still a read that you would be able to look and understand some of what that it's trying to communicate.
yeah.
And so that's why I really enjoy this book.
I think one of the hardest things for me anyways as a parent is just knowing what, like in catching yourself in the moment, you're like, okay, nope, don't say anything. But there's that time period too where you're thinking, okay, so what do I say? Should I say nothing? Or what, it's just that because it's so hard sometimes, or you just want to react, or you want to or tell them, instruct them, use logic, use, all those parent don'ts, right? So it's really hard. Do you have any pearls of wisdom for us, for those of us struggling?
It's okay to pause. I find in my work often when I'm responding to crisis situations that I have to pause and think about all the tools that I could use. You pay attention to the environment. If a student is yelling at me, he or she is not ready to talk. If they're so emotional, I'm giving them that space, but I'm staying close, letting them know that I'm here to listen. And right now we don't have to do anything, but I'm here in this space with you. Giving them that eye contact, letting them know, but just taking a pause, really. I think that's the advice I have for you is taking a pause, separating the behavior from the child and what is the ultimate goal. For my students, it's mostly, if we have a dysregulation, we're trying to get them to a place of calm and safety. We want to make sure that we can reach a point of calm before we return back to the classroom, because if we're not calm, if we're not happy and relaxed, we're probably not going to get any work done. And the same with children, where you're not going to get any points across, you're not going to get any compliance if they're not calm, happy, or relaxed. So just learning what tools your child needs and what tools for you to use, and just being patient. One thing that I've heard from a lot of professionals in this field is that if you've ever met one person with an intellectual disability, or if you've ever met one person, you've only ever met one person. Every situation is different and everybody responds differently.
Yeah, we're all unique and individual, even in what we're going through, our responses.
Yeah, so you use these tools and apply them to your situation as they, show up.
Very good. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but Nyla, I thank you for your pearls of knowledge and wisdom and walking us through some of these things here. And we will share the recording along with your presentation with those who registered and weren't able to attend our live session. But thank you for your time today. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.